What do CEOs need to know about sales these days? A lot. Outdated sales strategies and tactics plague most companies today. Listen to what innovative CEOs and experts have to say about how to change all that with Sales Talk for CEOs. Welcome to Sales Talk for CEOs. One of the things I love the most about interviewing founder CEOs is when I get to talk to someone that I knew when they very first started their company, and I've been able to watch them grow the entire time. And so it's exciting for me to have the guest that I have today because I met him in 2016 when he was very first starting. And now 7 years later, I've been watching his success. So welcome to the show, Tom.
Hey, Alice, how you doing? Great to be here.
And Tom Lavery is the CEO of Jiminny. Tell us a little bit about what Jiminny does.
Yeah, absolutely, Alice. Pleasure to be here today, by the way. Probably got a few more grey hairs in my beard since I saw you like seven years ago, but that comes from running a company. We're a conversation intelligence provider. Quite a lot of people might know what that is. A lot of people might not, but basically what we do is we record, transcribe, and analyze video, voice, and email. It's really powerful for the marketing and sales tech stack, and companies can use that data to help improve their team and coach and train and make decisions as a business. Yeah, it's basically what we do.
Very important software because as you and I both know, the key to really improving your sales is improving the leadership. And the leadership cannot coach well unless they have good data, right? And so your platform's providing this information, this data that sales leaders need to improve their coaching, which of course, in the end improves the seller, which improves our sales. So we'll get to that some more in a minute. But as you know on this show, I really love to hear the beginning. And I know some of the beginning of your story because I talked to you back then, but I'd like the audience and all the CEOs listening to hear. So take us back to 7 years ago when you were just starting Jiminny. What were you doing right before that? And how did you get the idea to start Jiminny? Tell us about that.
Yeah. So obviously I used to live in the States. That's how I came across and we got introduced to each other. But I lived in New York and I lived in Boston. So prior to starting Jiminny, I was an SVP of sales. So that I'm a salesperson, sales manager, sales leader before I became a founder and started Jiminny. I worked for a HR software company and I worked there for nearly a decade, and we grew that from pretty much zero. And it actually recently just got acquired for over $1 billion by a big French company. So that's still an amazing business. It's called Reward Gateway. But when we grew that, we grew the UK market, the Australian market, and then I went out and set up the US market. And we eventually had probably like nearly 100 people in customer facing roles, like talking to customers. And especially when we set up what used to be, you'll remember this, what people used to call inside sales before COVID. Now everyone just calls it sales, right? Because it's the same way. But we were in an office in New York, and I could see in the States most ticket price, under 100K, people already weren't going face to face like in Europe. And everyone who's of a certain vintage will remember the days where you'd have like WebEx, Salesforce, pad and paper, Avaya desk phone, and we really cared about coaching and developing our inside sales team. And I really wanted to understand what was still going on in Europe, but I couldn't do the same. I couldn't see what was going on. So the reality of what was in our CRM, and then being able to actually physically give feedback and make our team better, I just felt it was broken and I couldn't really do it. So I kind of just had the inspiration for capturing all the data, putting it into one place. And I've got two co-founders, one technical and my wife actually as well. She's very passionate about coaching and wanted to give me a tool where we could give feedback and coach and capture the data, and it all just span out from there really. So I think with a lot of founders, it tends to be, you see a problem, you see it and you think, oh, could I have a tool to do this? You see it's not really out there, and then you kind of go and build it.
Absolutely. I think that is so true, that you are fixing a problem, that you had when you were in a past life, right? That's what
Mhm.
most founders do. Although most founders don't have a sales background. And I think that does give you a leg up when you're first starting, right? So we'll talk about that in a minute.
Mhm.
But what I love is that you started this company based on thinking about what you needed to coach sellers. And
Mhm.
when they're on the phone and you can record them, that's fine. That gives you some bit of information, but it doesn't give the whole picture. And what Jiminny does more so is take in all the communication that the salespeople are having and bring that information to the sales leader or to the salesperson themselves to diagnose, right? And see where they can get better. So you had this great idea. You said you had a technical co-founder because probably you didn't know how to code software at that point, I'm guessing.
No, I still don't. No,
And
not to go.
right, and nor should you, right?
Mm.
So you and your wife, who's also a co-founder, you
Mhm.
got started. How did this start out? Were you talking about it, sketching it out? How did you get this product up and running to a point where you could start talking to people about it?
Yeah, I think we had the early idea in some way, shape, or form of like a feedback tool or a way of helping in like spring of 2016. And then I was still working in my previous company. We went through the final exit, and then I took a few months out. Now I wish I took a bit of a longer break. That's another story for another day. And then we started coding in the September of 2017, and we launched a beta version in the July time of 2017. But we started with a blank Google Doc, and I actually onboarded a new cohort of employees today, and I always do it personally, like a culture and value session, and another kind of why Jiminny and how we started, and tell them the story. Um, but one of the things we did was we wrote our culture and values out before we even wrote the tech spec. Because in terms of like what type of company do you want to build? What do you want it to feel like to work at Jiminny? Which is, like always a work in process. So we had a blank sheet of paper and we had a mission, which was like from day one. I'm a very big fan of Simon Sinek. I'm sure you know who he is. But when I read that book in 2011, 2012, way before I started the company, whenever it was, it definitely everything I do today, even when I wrote our product vision moving forward, is like, what's our why? How are we going to do it? What's the end result? So we had our values and we had our why. Our mission is be the best version of you. I know people talk about that a lot now, but back in 2016, it wasn't such a thing. So yeah, and then we kind of thought, how can we build the product from there? You know.
Yeah, and I remember in those early days before you had it built, you and I talked
Mm,
about it,
mm,
and you had given me just this idea of what it was going to be and what you were trying to build.
mm.
How many people did you talk to before you started building or while you were building it to really take in the ideas to, really narrow in on what you wanted to build?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot, because I'm a hustler, salesperson, whatever you want to call it by nature. So I was just socializing my idea like very, very quickly. Just thinking about prospective clients, people who could beta test, use the platform. So that started in the end of that summer of 2016, as soon as we like started the company properly. But we didn't actually have a live product till the following June. So of course, I'm working with the designers, I'm working with the engineers. I learn how to build a product. So you're learning how to do that for the first time. Um, but then probably selling and talking to people for 9 months. It's probably one of the most frustrating things as a founder, that you have this great idea and you have this product and you have to wait almost like the same length as a baby. Right? I've got 3 kids and you got to wait like 6 or 9 months for it to pop out. So yeah, definitely you have to be a little bit patient.
Yeah, it definitely requires patience. There's no
Mhm.
doubt. So the product was ready and you had talked to a lot of people. How did you get
Mm.
your first sales?
Oh, actually, there's a funny story there, because our, our I think 3 of our first 6 clients are still customers, which just amazes me.
I
One or
love
two of
that.
them, one or two of them have left and come back, but they're still customers today. Um, So it was really network. Half were in the US where I was. So really it's about proximity. So you want to do things that are not scalable to become scalable. So I kept it really local. So I was living in Wellesley in Boston, and I made sure I could go and see people. And like we got it live on site. We could go and interact with the users and stuff like that. So we kept it really local and kind of tried to do it in person, so people could really trust in kind of what we're doing. And we had some great people who really believed in us and kind of understood what it was. You know, back then in 2016, 2017, when I spoke to you, I reckon 50% of the time when you talked about the concept, you said, right, so you're going to record every interaction, and my AE or my BDR is going to be recorded every single call. Especially on the AE side, 50% would be like, what? No. Culturally, it's like my dad's generation was maybe still salesman as a leader. So it took time for millennials to become dominant. We always talk about the collision of three things. The market has to be right, product has to be good, and, timing and everything else. So, yeah.
Yeah, timing's a big one for founders.
Mm.
And I think sometimes, we try to force the issue in the early stages, right? But timing is everything. And I think we forget about that. We write these great business plans so that we can get funded, but sometimes the market's just not right yet, and it's going to have to grow with you. And there's a lot of educating that has to happen and mindset changing, right? So that can slow you down sometimes. So it's always really good to know, whether the market's ready or not. You may have a great idea, and people may even think it's a great idea, but adoption is a whole nother story. So you're down that path, right?
Mm.
And I like that you went local so that you could visit. That probably helped with the user adoption. So
Mm-hmm.
you got a couple of companies up and running on it, got their mindset shifted. Yes, everything's going to be recorded. It's all going to be fed into one place. We're going to be able to give you the data back so that you can help yourself and your leader can help you and coach you.
Mm.
Where did it go from there?
So I think I think going back to your other point, it's really interesting, especially if your audience is CEOs. Product market fit, if you want to call it that, it's a very tricky thing to work out as a first-time founder. It can come in different guises, and I think it really depends on the vertical and the space. So I think you're looking for product market fit very early after that. Like you've got these 10 customers, they're using it, you're kind of getting feedback. But for me, I think product market fit takes a long time. Like you have to like the product's never finished. It's like a piece of art, right? Even now, there's always something to change, always something to improve, always something to make better. But I think when it can be sold, launched, run, and renewed without your intervention as a founder, that's probably when you truly have. So it's not necessarily a number in ARR, a number of customers. It's more of a, does it start to happen without you to some extent? And I feel that's the bullet. Everyone always tries to put a label on something. Oh, you get to 1 million and you got product market fit, or you get to this many logos, or whatever you're at this stage. But I think it's actually more about that. So the next phase for us is just really like, is it going to work? Do people use it? Do they renew? What do we need to change? And we got a lot wrong in the beginning, as you do. A lot of it was right, and then we had to make some changes.
And at that point, you're still doing all the sales, or maybe your one of your co-founders is with you doing that.
Yeah. Like for a long time, we kept it really lean. We bootstrapped, remortgaged, the usual story. Took some money out of the house, whatever. And then we took some small seed investment. And it was only till a year ago we took any sort of sizable investment. So that comes with this pros and cons, but yeah. So it was a, interesting journey. I was looking back the other day, and it was just really, if you think about that period of time that we've had here, like you've had probably the biggest tech crunch, if you want to call it that, in 20 years. There's a war going on, we've had COVID. Like it's just like it's one thing after another. So I think if we can survive the first 6 years of having a product and a company, hopefully the next 6 years will be even better.
Yeah. At what point did you decide that you and your co-founders could no longer do all the selling and do the other things that were necessary? And did you go out and then hire salespeople first or customer success people? How did you grow into where you are now?
Yeah, so I did the selling like solely like closing the deals, like I think for the first couple of years, because we get the product right, we had to pivot, we changed different things. So um, just in terms of like having an integrations model and different things like that. So we spent in the first like few years of Jiminny probably getting to our first sort of, couple of hundred customers or whatever. We invested like 3 times more in CS than we did in sales. So we're very focused on that customer experience. I mean, there's lots of different things you read as a founder, like different, you can listen to different people out there, like Simon Sinek, Gary Vee, Seth Godin, these different people. But I think, we've got a new feature in AI right now. We launch it next year. 6 months later, even faster to copy. A lot of products stay the same. So one of the things, when I talk about the culture and the values that we decided very early on is one of our USPs, because you need to have many, is going to be that we're going to deliver world-class service. So if you, Alice, go to a great hotel and it leaves a warm, fuzzy feeling, you're going to go back, right? Because you have a great experience. And I know people have different views on this. It's not going to ever be the reason that someone stays or someone just chooses your product, but it can be one of the things that they factor in to their decision criteria. So for us, it was always like, if we really care, we have great KPIs on support. It helps to drive user adoption and referrals, like a lot of it. So, our customer service and our support has always been something that we put a lot of investment, both in time, hours, team, resource, to make sure we can give people the best experience possible.
Absolutely. And it is so much more sustainable. I think that one of the great things about being bootstrapped or mostly bootstrapped
Mhm.
versus taking the venture money early on is you don't have to be as focused on new logos and you can be more focused on retaining the customers that you do bring in, which I personally feel is much more sustainable way to grow. The minute you get the pressure on, right, from the investors and they want that top line growth and that revenue from brand new customers, they're not necessarily as focused on your retention rates or customer success. And I always say that we shouldn't just count how many customers we have, we should count how many successful customers we have. Can they be successful using what you sold them, which means user adoption? And of course, that's not the seller's job. So once a seller does their job, someone's got to take care of the customer. Someone's got to make sure they get the user adoption they need and that they're successful using what we sold them. And it sounds like that's what you were focused on. So how did that work for you and how did that help you grow?
Yeah, I think we were very lucky. We kept doubling each year. I mean, whose opinion on what is good, great, whatever. Um, so we did that successfully. I'd say we got to the first 3 million of ARR with like one sales rep, one BDR, but we had like 4 or 5 people in customer success. So yeah, like I think there's that thing as well. Is like every medium's changed out there. If you're a CEO, like people contact you on LinkedIn, they don't phone anymore. You market in different ways, but at the end of the day, someone tells someone something's great, and they go look it up and find it. You don't have the yellow pages; you have a website. But at the end of the day, the same thing still happens. Someone has a great experience. They say, "Go check this out. I used this before. I'm going to use it again in my next new company." So yeah, we just really focused on that. I know even now when I look at how we generate all our inbound leads and our demand gen, and I look at organic and paid and everything, and then referrals is still like one of the biggest sources of how we get net new business. And that's driven by a lot of the work you do with customers for me. Mm-hmm.
And as it should be, right? Because referral selling is so much easier, right, than cold outreach. And people who are successful, companies who are successful with your product are of course going to tell other people, or like you mentioned, when they move on to a new company, right? They're going to take you with them. And there's no better form of flattery than that, right? They're telling you, listen, you did such a great job. We're going to take you with us. And I love that. So do you have a formal referral selling process in place at your company to drive that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So what we do is there's a couple of things that happen. So I know it's going to sound nuts, but basically, when inbound demo requests come in, I will personally connect with every single one, to say thanks for reaching out to the team. So we have a touch point there, and when a new customer comes in or a renewal comes in, we send them a thank you email from me, and it offers time with them. Very few people take it up. I'd say 1 in 10, maybe. And then the sales team, because depending on the size, mid-market versus enterprise, the sales cycle is different. Every month, I think it's the first Thursday of every month, they have a referral meeting, and they look back at their clients, obviously 90 days in plus. So make sure they're happy and they're embedded and things are going well. Then they'll look at which ones they can kind of ask for referrals from and stuff like that. So we tend to have certain things that happen in the process to kind of make that experience the best it can be. You need to do, I think, a lot for the customer before you can have the permission to ask for that. So there's a process and period of time maybe before. So yeah, you got to give them a great experience in the sales process, onboarding, and then you probably got the right to ask.
Totally agree. You have to earn the right to ask. They have to have had success using what you sold them, right? And have great things to say about it. And then it's very easy because they can't wait to help you, right? But I think one of the things a lot of sales teams miss is that they don't ask. So they will get some referrals, right? Because if they're doing a great job, people will tell others and they'll call in. But those may be few and far between, not even one a month. But when you're doing it the way you mentioned, where you're talking about it each week and how are these companies doing with our product, and when then go back to them after they've had success and actually ask them, it really is a much easier way to get business than cold outreach. Not that you shouldn't also do cold outreach, no problem with that, and all the content marketing and all the SEO and all those other things. But I think that referrals should be a very large part of the demand gen, and should be, so much easier to close, right? So no reason not to focus on those. All right. So
well, you can track. We can, like, when you break it down, you get a bit bigger. You can see the difference. Like, I would say the conversion rate is double on referral in our business. Absolutely. So if it comes in from referral, you're talking like the difference between 60% and 30% on an opt to close rate, So.
Yeah. It just baffles me that so many companies don't pay attention to referrals, right? Because it really, truly is a better way to sell, right? All right. So what does your sales team look like now today?
So good question. Like, it's always evolving as we grow and stuff like that. We're just making some changes for go-to-market plans. I'm sure, like most people are, if they're getting to the end of Q4 and they're thinking about next year and their sales kickoffs, you have to kind of plan ahead. But the way it works right now is I support and help still. Like, I'm sure I speak to other CEOs all the time. Doesn't matter if you're 100 million or 10 million or whatever. I think a lot of CEOs spend their time talking to their biggest customers on renewals and helping the sales team, maybe win their biggest deals on customers like that. So it still takes up a good chunk of my time. I always have a barometer in whatever shape or form. If I'm not spending 50, 60% of my time talking to prospects and customers, am I really doing my job? Because it helps with the product, the vision, learning, all of that stuff. But Shelley's like our chief commercial officer. We're actually looking for a new marketing director at the moment. And we have the VP of customer success. So it kind of sits with a revenue leader. And then we have quite a heavy inbound model, and we do some ABM, so BDR, AE. So we've got several AEs, and then we split out what we call strategic accounts, which is upsell. So we don't leave that with CS. They just kind of do the intros almost like BDR. And then our CS team on the revenue side is split out across enablement, technical onboarding, support, and then more of a strategic CSM doing the renewal and everything else.
Yeah, I love that when I said, what does your sales organization look like? You started with marketing and CS and then went to sales, right? Because really, I should have said go to market team, because
Yeah.
there's no such thing, right? Sales can't operate on its own. Customer success, it's not a silo. Marketing, it's not over here alone all by itself, right? These things truly have to come together today. I think they always needed to come together, but years ago when I was young, we seem to have operated more in silos. And customer success was really customer support, which was just only problem driven. It was all reactive, not proactive, right?
Yeah.
So I think that it's such a better way to look at that bigger picture of who's the customer and how do they want to buy from us. They need support from us on all ends. Like marketing may be the first to speak to them, and also the last to speak to them, and throughout their entire journey. If without marketing continuing to help us onboard, right, and continuing to give good messaging throughout the life cycle, right, through, from hello to I'm your loyal customer. Without that marketing touch, it makes it harder for customer success and harder for sales. So these really have to be so blended today. And I think that is just a great way to look at it, to help your company grow. So you also mentioned that you were still heavily involved in sales. And I always say that the CEO will always have a role in sales. It's just that role changes as the company matures, right? So now you have others leading the sales effort, and they call you in when they need you, right? Or, with these big customers, these 5, I always want to be involved. If their CEO is on, I want to be on. And you've given them some cues. But tell us more about how you help your team leverage the CEO, right? How do you train them to use you at the appropriate times with prospects and customers?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think over the last year, probably a lot more tech CEOs have probably got even more involved in everything, just because of the nature of how the market's been. I think you're right. Going back to your other point, like you did used to win a deal. I mean, I've been doing this 20 years working now. You used to win a deal a little bit more as an island, like you could do it yourself back in the day. Just now it's a real team sport. You
Yes,
can't close
100%.
you can't close a 6-figure tech or SaaS deal without multiple people being involved in the journey, depending on your process, proof of concept, trial, anything. So yeah, for me, I think it's it really comes into like deal management and support. So like each quarter, there's a certain amount of renewals that might need to be reusing certain parts of maybe they're an existing cohort and the product's moved on a lot. Maybe there's something that we're rolling out new. Like at the moment, we've got this install package of Salesforce. It's very good for enterprise customers. They can embed everything in Salesforce. So I've been talking to a lot of new customers about that. So really, I think there's once they get to the opportunity stage in sales, and then they're past call number 3, get past call number 3 or 4, the propensity to buy goes up. We can track that. We can see that, there's a probability there. Then if there's like decision maker meetings with other exec sponsors or wherever you go, then they'll kind of bring me in to kind of match it up or to help and support. And on the renewals, it tends to be a lot of stuff in mid-market and enterprise, that's coming up on a quarterly basis. But our team do a great job of handling a lot of it. It's just when they want my help or want my support.
Well, there's nothing better than being able to bring in that CEO confidence, especially when, companies are right now really careful with their spending on tech, and, the tech stacks are too tall. Let's face it, right? There's just too much, and there's low user adoption. So when they're looking at something like Jiminny to bring in, they need the confidence that comes from a CEO who knows, who can talk about other companies like them, right? Who can help them understand the user adoption. Not that your salespeople can't do that, but there's nothing like having the CEO be able to talk about that with another senior leader or CEO.
Yeah, we have like a innovation roadmap as well. So, we're only really starting to scratch the surface in this space. I know if you're in SaaS or tech, you think it's been around a while, but it's probably the most valuable data set that you have in the sales and marketing tech stack. And it can be it doesn't matter what provider there is. Probably we're all not doing a good enough job at pushing the insights back proactively. So there's a lot of different data to mine that hasn't been mined. And I think there's a whole change anyway in tech where you have a product, you go in and do something. That's changing now with AI. I think it's more about you mine the data, you spit out, here's why things are working, here's what you need to change. So you can see that happening already in terms of what clients' expectations are, what we're trying to build, all those other things.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, it's great to hear what's coming from the senior leader as well. The CEO, CRO, somebody else in senior leadership, maybe it's even the chief engineering officer or something, especially on a bigger deal, right? They want to hear about the future and how you continue to grow together, right? So I think those are great conversations for senior leaders to have. I think one thing that is really important is to make sure your sales team, your sales leaders know how to bring you in, when to bring you in, how to prep you for the call so that you can really shine and do what you do best to help that deal move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I think it's always a certain amount of context and understanding. It's like anything. I didn't say it's so much a game, but you can't. Not any one meeting or conversation will go exactly the same way. Of course, you need structure and you need outcomes, but at the same time, you need to be prepared to, approach different characters and different personalities in different ways.
Yeah. So as we kind of wind up here, I'm just curious, you mentioned that for the first time you actually did take on some funding. And so how is your sales going to grow and change based on that? What do you have planned for your sales organization?
So yeah, I think like our deal velocity keeps going up. I think like look, it's not been easy for anyone in the market. So I wouldn't pretend that there's not challenges in terms of like maybe like downsell, sales team shrinking, stuff like that. But I think there is a need, like we're one of those things in the tech stack that the rest of the maybe non-tech people are thinking, oh God, I need this now. And people can't live without. So I think we're in a good space. And I think there's other spaces where maybe they're growing even faster, but I think we're probably in the middle. So yeah, I think it's just a constant challenge. I think the thing for me is efficiency and effectiveness of your sales team. Like your biggest cost is always adding people, and the classic thing, I was 24, 25. We take private equity investment. I'm an SVP of sales. Accountants tell you add 10 more salespeople, Tom, and let's do 10 times more sales. And we've all done that. And I think the more that I run a company, the more I'm making sure that I'm led by the data and I make my decisions by what I see. And you always think, oh, I just hire that one more person and it's going to solve that problem. It doesn't always do that. So I think, how are you making, for us anyway, how am I making us as efficient and effective as possible with the 65, 70 employees we have this year, next year? Do we actually, to grow 30, 40% again next year, do we need more people or do we just need to be more efficient? I think it's the latter.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, rarely does throwing more salespeople at it rarely works, right? You think, oh, if we have 1 million now, if we add 10 salespeople, we'll have 10 million. Unfortunately, that math does not work.
No.
And when you have a bunch of sellers who are not at quota, adding more sellers is rarely the answer, right? Maybe replacing a seller or two is the answer, but why not focus on, like you said, the efficiencies of getting everyone to hit quota? Because typically, let's just say you have 10 sellers and only 50% of them are hitting quota, and you're thinking, well, add more salespeople. No, why not get everyone to hit quota or get them a lot closer to hitting quota through efficiencies, through training, through coaching, or sometimes through replacing, right? Those are better ways to look at it when you're trying to increase sales. And I think efficiencies are so important. If a salesperson can do 4,000 now, if you could put some tools in place or change some things, remove something from the plate, and they could do 5,000, that's a huge increase. So I love that you have that focus on efficiencies versus just hiring more salespeople.
Yeah, of course. And things change, like you get more products or things get more technical. Kind of think of it like a sports team with a business. Like often especially in startups, growing companies, people have relationships and it's like, oh, this is changing, or someone's leaving, can be seen as maybe sometimes as a negative thing, but sometimes you buy a player in a soccer team and they don't fit into the system. Yeah, because
Right.
you're like, okay, well, we're playing this formation. That player's not good at playing that formation. So we got to transfer them. It's very acceptable in sport. But in business, it's like, okay, well, yep, I can make this person as good as they can, but we're going in this direction and it's more enterprisey and outbound. Not as just an example. Is it going to fit for that person no matter how much coaching you do? So you've got to have, when I look at it, and this took me a long time to learn, is basically we look at really take our time over recruiting, and you think about skill fit, culture fit. Yeah, so can they live your values? Because people very rarely leave on performance. It's usually cultural things, if you're being honest. So skill, culture, team fit. So if you've got a team dynamic of this, do they fit into that? Do you need more experience, less experience? And then the last thing is, are they stage appropriate? Because often that is the thing that catches you out. Like, are they ready to be this scrappy or not that scrappy?
Yes.
Can they deal with this much resource? Do they want progression too quickly than what you can offer? So all of these things need to be factored in. It's not just, oh, they're good. And, I think they'll fit into our culture. Probably not enough.
Yeah. Well, we've all made tons of hiring mistakes, and it does
Yeah.
take a lot of work to get that team really to the point where you want them. And the thing is that as the company grows and matures, some of those players just don't fit anymore. And I love your analogy to soccer, because that is exactly right. Or to any sport. Sometimes that player is just not the right player for this team anymore. Terrific person. It's not about that. Right. And in business, we need to feel more free to change our players out without it being such a big deal. And it really should be about, like you said, the culture, the team, the skills, the fit. Well, gosh, thank you so much for being on the show today. Any last words for our listeners about growing a sales organization, a go-to-market organization?
No, I guess to say it in an English way, it's just bloody tough. It's never easy, but just to never give up and keep going. I think most companies don't fail, people give up. That's the thing. There's always a route that you can take, ultimately. I always say, I'm on LinkedIn and I'm active. If anyone ever wants to reach out, I think when you're pre-seed, seed, trying to get your first A round, every stage gets harder in its own ways, but no one really wants to know too much then if you haven't got a lot of connections. So it can be not an easy place trying to get your company off the ground. But if I can ever help anyone or give some advice or support, then you can always reach out and find me on LinkedIn.
Wonderful. So find Tom on LinkedIn, and of course, let him know that you heard him here on Sales Talk for CEOs. And also, where can they find more about Jiminny?
Yeah, of course. Best place to go is to go to our website. It's JIMINNY.com. And this is the little chat support. You can request a demo. You can speak to someone instantly, or they can reach out to me for sure.
Well, thanks again so much. And I noticed your voice is a little hoarse, like you told me. So I hope you feel better. I hope that gets better soon. And I appreciate you talking through the show, even with that. So thank you so much for being on the show today.
Absolute pleasure, Alice. Good to see you.
If you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.